Good evening, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Putting a squirt to bed. Let me just check everything is working here. What do I got? Okay. Hello and welcome to another Sunday wrap. Um, a fair-sized one. Most of these I talked about this afternoon. We had the chat this afternoon. Rasa was unavailable, so I had a special guest with me. Damn, I forgot my water. I had a special guest with me, Donald Rex. So if you want to go back to my channel, you can find that chat. I'll start out with this because this is exciting news. Our good friend Colin Blanchette loading the canon, comic book manifesto, etc. He has put out the first issue of his Canon magazine for readers of fine comics, which after reading my article, you're going to question the word fine. So I was fortunate enough to be asked to contribute to this. I really appreciated it. I've never done anything like this before. I've never had any thoughts or desires to do writing of any kind. It was actually a lot of fun. It was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. This is a beefy magazine of the first issue. If you go and follow Colin, Twitter is loading the canon. YouTube is loading the canon 1919. Instagram is loading the canon. And then there's a Gmail as well, too, loadingthecanon@gmail.com. And you can get in touch with Colin and you can buy an issue. I believe he's got a website up as well, too. Probably loadingthecanon.com or something. I don't know off the top of my head, and I'm not seeing it on the inside front. But get in touch with Colin, and he can secure you a copy. So here's what we have. Interviews with 3 cartoonists, a bunch of articles from some YouTube staples like Gary Usher, Ray Carcassis, I believe, Ryan Carey, the infamous Ryan Carey, of course, me, Alex Eklund as well. And the interviews are done by Colin himself, the 3 comic creator interviews, Carl Stevens, Tom Manning, and John Allen are the 3 interviews. All really, really nicely presented, really nicely laid out, quality paper, some beautiful samples of artwork as well too. All black and white, which is glorious. And I was saying to Donald this afternoon that he talks about drawing influence from Bubbles and Strangers, and I can absolutely see that, but I really feel like this magazine sits beautifully in kind of the classic fanzines of like the 70s and stuff, where it was fans of comics, not necessarily cartoonists and people creating or distributing necessarily, that were writing articles and just kind of fanboying out to some degree, right? There was an absolute sense of that. So this, I feel, really sits nicely in that. I think it's fantastic. There's been a lot of talk about this stuff over the years, and thoughts about it. It's really amazing that something actually came to pass. And like I said, I'm super happy I was able to contribute my hand scrawled reviews of some dollar bin finds. And this one, it was focused on Canadian comics. He's asked me to contribute to the second, and of course I've said yes. So I've already started taking notes for that and break out the pen and the templates again, the Ames guide, the lettering guide, and start lettering it up, and laying it out much better than I did for this first one, now that I've seen it in print and hopefully learned a thing or two. So there you go. That is Canon. And there's the ad on the back for atheniumcomicart.com and some of the people that he represents: Nate Garcia, Caroline Cash, John Allen, Carl Stevens, Nate Powell, Noah Van Sciver. Yeah, check his stuff out too. So beautiful job. I'm hoping to, well, not hoping to, we are going to, Colin and I are going to chat. I'm thinking probably Tuesday is what's gonna work best for me. So I'll get in touch with him and set that up. But look for kind of a sit down one-on-one with me and Colin so I can kind of pick his brain a little bit on how it went, what the impetus was, where he feels this sits for him, what he wants to do in the future, and just a little bit of insight into trying to how it was doing the interviews, for example. Like, what was that process like? Because I think, like me, he doesn't have a ton of experience in this realm. So it'll be interesting to hear what that experience was like for him as kind of someone who's doing a first time outing like this. I think it's a really huge accomplishment, and he should be very proud of it. Hello, AFPC. How are you? So we'll start out with the couple of things that I read that I didn't talk about with Donald this afternoon. Not much to say about them. Yes, they were very interesting, for sure. They were. All three interviews were really great. It'll be cool to see that kind of thing continue as well too. I'm hoping there's more cartoonists out there that are willing to talk to him and do some get some stuff down in black and white. I recently found some older Ren and Stimpy, including this first issue. It still had the poly bag. It was open, and there's this I guess at one point it stunk. You scratched Stimpy's nose, and it smelt awful. And of course, I took it out of the poly bag, so I'm being told I'm an idiot for doing it. Ruins all its value. What can I say? I'm a huge fan of the cartoon. I've always been a fan of the cartoon. This was a comic based on the cartoon, written by somebody who wasn't associated. So Dan Slott is the writer. Mike Kazala is the artist. Brad K. Joyce, letterer. And then Evan Skolnick on colors. And it was just okay. I mean, there's something, you can never really capture that charm and stupidity that the cartoon was. But I am a fan, and I've got such a big chunk of these. It's one of those things that if I'm finding them for cheap, I'll just kind of keep filling in the gaps. Yeah, so there you go. Ren and Stimpy numero uno. I did dig into this here. Let's put that there. I did dig into this Colin Upton's Other Big Thing, this #1 magazine-sized issue. This was enjoyable. There was some good stuff in here. I don't think it's my favorite of the Colin Upton stuff that I've read, but it was really good. Let's have a quick flip through to remind myself of some of the strips that were in here. Incapacitated. Yeah, there was this odd story here about a cat who ends up living inside a guy's head, and he tries to continue on with his life, tries to get it extracted, but that doesn't work. So he's told basically, well, you just got to live with it. There's nothing we can do for you. You've just got to live. And he gets kind of ostracized, kind of finds peace eventually with this cat. And then he ends up finding a woman who's got a dog living in her head. And that kind of sparks a little more peace with him. He becomes famous on television, and a very odd little story. Yeah, like I said, this wasn't a horrible issue. I don't know if it was my favorite of the Colin Upton stuff I've read, though. A lot of the stories don't really stick with me like some of the other books have. As usual, there's some good anti-war stuff in here as well, too. Which seems to be a theme in a lot of his books. So anyway, some Colin Upton from Fantagraphics. This one was what, 1991 is when that one came out. So and then I think the rest is stuff that I spoke about this afternoon. Let me find where all this stuff is here. So the one that I was reading with my daughter We were reading Autumn Lands together. Just 14 issues. I haven't looked into it any further, but I don't think any more issues came out after this. I think that was it. Even though at the end of issue 14, he had talked about um, potential for some more books that they were working on. Busiek was. But as far as I understand it, that never came to pass. Some really just gorgeous art, and honestly it was a really engaging story. So my daughter is 9. There was quite a lot of bad language in here. There was some nudity and things. There was a little bit of violence. The way that we speak around the house, it's not like hearing the F-bomb is something that she hasn't heard in her life. I do have a bit of a sailor's mouth at times, so she has heard some curse words, so that wasn't really the shocking stuff. And honestly, the nudity when it comes to things, I'm not so concerned about. For me, it's more about the violence. But the thing is, when there was some violence, there wasn't a ton of it, first of all. And when it was kind of gory for sure. But I didn't feel it was too much to kind of turn her off. And honestly, she was really, really invested in the story. She was very curious. We read a couple of issues a night when we kind of got into it. And it was just so much fun to read. It's so much fun to read with the kids in general. I'll say, I mean, I've read with both of my kids. I mean, Jesus, I read with Jaden probably far longer than I should have. But it's the same thing with Lillian. We've always read books and we read a bunch of comics together. And of course, she does a lot of reading on her own. It's just so much fun to read this kind of thing with your kids, or any sort of serialized story, especially one like this that's based in kind of this fantasy world. There's a lot in it for me to sink my teeth into. There's enough in it for her to sink her teeth into as well. Um, I mean, she was genuinely invested in what was going on, so it was really exciting, and the conversations that would happen after the issues were a lot of fun too. Both of us felt the same way when we hit issue 14. We were both, first of all, disappointed that that was it. I think both of us were a little bit. I kind of wish there was a little more. I understand that you want to kind of keep the mystery and you don't want to spell everything out, especially when you're planning what at the time was going to be a long form story. I wish there was a little more loose ends tied up. I wish we would have found out a little more information. But like I said, I understand why they didn't do it based on what their intentions were. I'm curious as to what the story is. I haven't looked up anything yet. I imagine people just got busy with other things, or this kind of, I think, suffered from the usual. There was a lot of delays with this book. He was constantly apologizing for it being late, so maybe that translated into sales really, really dropping off for this book near the end. So maybe that's what contributed to not going for it again. But beautiful art, really cool story. It feels like it's also ripe for a lot of other really interesting stories as they kind of continue exploring through this world and meeting other groups of animals. I feel like there was a lot of room to see, especially for our kind of main dog character here, whose name I'm blanking on right now. He had lived in the clouds and was kind of part of like royalty and was just kind of the heir to this business and the throne kind of thing. So he was really getting a chance to see how everybody who lived on the surface, how they lived, and the different tribes and the different factions and challenges they faced as a group. So I felt like there was a lot of room for him to grow as a character. Some of my fondest memories growing up involve reading with my grandmother. Yeah, it's the same. Like, I got some really good memories of reading with my dad when we were young as well too. So it's fun. And it's so great to be on the other side of it now too, right? Like, to read these stories. I mean, I think I've talked about it here before. Winnie the Pooh is one of my all-time favorite books. And reading that book with both kids at different times was just such a joy. There's some books that they just need to be read out loud, and I think that that's absolutely one of them. It's so much better reading it out loud and yeah, it just brings it to a whole different level, right? So some of the best stuff I've read. What else do I have here? So I read a bunch of Vertigo stuff. We'll quickly talk about these ones. Not too much to say. So at Cover to Cover, which is one of my favorite shops in town here, he's got quite a bit of back issues, a lot of indies and things. He's got a lot of kind of Vertigo, DC Vertigo stuff. He's got a lot of Epic stuff as well too. They're all in long boxes that are on the ground that you got to kind of crouch down and pull them out of their spot and flip through them. But it's great flipping through some of those. The prices on some of these, they could be a bit cheaper, but I also understand that the guy's got to make a buck. So it's not necessarily prices I would always want to pay for these, but I do really like his shop and I really like supporting him. And especially like when it comes to some of this stuff, I'm just not finding it other places. So it's worth it every once in a while to fork over that little bit extra money to be able to get my hands on some of this stuff. So this is Junk Culture. It was a 2-issue series from Ted McKeever from 1997. Not too much to say about it. The story was just so. Out of all of the Ted McKeever stuff I've read, this is probably a bit lower on that scale. One of the things I did really enjoy was the art. I always love his art. There's a real sense of Metropol in this art style here now. His style really kind of ebbs and flows and definitely changes over the years. Thinking of like some of his last stuff, that Pencilhead, I think it was called. It's quite a bit further away from where he was at this point. But in these pictures, I really see a lot of Metropol era Ted McKeever here. And I love it. I'm not sure what's going on with the formatting while there's all this white space around it. I guess he drew it at an odd size. I don't quite understand, though, because it looks like there's room for it to kind of grow and fill the page a little more. But a minor complaint. Basically a story of these two sisters without spoiling anything. Obviously, the second issue, there's a lot of reveals that happen with these sisters. I just don't know if the story was that engaging or if the payoff... Yeah, I didn't see anything. I see you there. I commented twice with the address for Colin Zine, but I don't think it's visible. No, it's not. I'm not even seeing it. Sometimes that stuff, if there's stuff that needs approval, it'll show up for me, and then I need to approve it, but I'm not even seeing anything sidebarred here, AFPC. Here you go. Yeah. WW. It's a good way to do it. Canon Zine. So www.canonzine probably com. Oh, Big Cartel. Of course, it's Big Cartel. See, there you go, AFPC. You figured it out how. You figured out how. bigcartel.com. Boom. You did it. So yeah, if you're a McKeever fan, 100% you need this book because it's McKeever and it's beautiful to look at, but it's lower on that list of things to rush out and get. Definitely one to keep an eye out for in the cheap bins to see if you come across it there. But I'm a huge McKeever fan, so nothing was going to stop me. I've been waiting forever to see... Hello, Gary Usher. I've been waiting forever to find the other issue of The Horrorist from Jamie Delano, I believe is probably how it's pronounced, and David Lloyd. 2 issues from DC Vertigo. This one is, oh boy, I think that says 1995. Yeah, 1995 for this one. John Constantine and a character called the Horrorist. This woman who is going around and kind of bringing out the evils of humanity in various forms, and particularly to haunting violent ends for people that she comes into contact with. So Constantine is tasked with going and hunting her down so he can kind of put a stop to it. Um, this was great. This was a really good read, and I mean, the first thing that it showed me was that I need to dig into Hellblazer again. I had read a bunch of the trade paperbacks. I've never read the entire thing though. I know back in the day when Travis Oddfellow's Thoughts was around, this was his go-to book. He was a huge fan of this. So it triggers that for me where I've got to read some more. This is a really great world. This era of Vertigo does it for me. I know it's not for everybody, but I happen to really enjoy this stuff. So this was a blast to go through. And there are these kind of beautiful square bound kind of books here as well too. Really cool. And actually I didn't bring it downstairs, but I found today, I went to this used CD place. He got some Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd stuff in. So I went and bought a Pink Floyd CD and a Jimi Hendrix CD. And he also had, I think it was from last year, 2022, I think is what it said on the back of it. One of the DC animated, and it was a DC, like a Showcase Presents. It was a series of 4 short stories. One of them was a House of Mystery starring John Constantine and Spectre. Another one was The Losers. Another one was Commandy. And the 4th one was Blue Beetle. The Commandy was by far the best out of the 4. They really tried to mimic Kirby's style with the animation. I think they pulled it off very well. I was a fan of the DC animated stuff off at the beginning. I was really into it. They did a lot of amazing stuff, and then it kind of hit a point where the stuff that was coming out just wasn't that interesting anymore. And it was mainly due to the animation that they were starting to use. They were starting to really rely on this kind of computer style, and the backgrounds weren't exactly, honestly, for that, just as a quick sidebar, I'd start at the beginning. That's what I had done. The trouble, I seem to remember that one of the difficult things with the Hellblazer trade paperbacks was that they weren't numbered on the spine. So you do have to do a little bit of looking online for reading order as far as it comes to the trade paperbacks. I'm guessing, like a lot of things, DC and Vertigo, there's probably a big fat collection of all of it, probably an omnibus of some kind. I don't know that for a fact. But I mean, with a series like that, I feel like that's a series where you do have to read it from the beginning, because it really is about this character's journey. And kind of growing, you get to know the character so much more throughout it. So, but I'm far from an expert on Hellblazer. Maybe I'm talking total shit, and you can jump in at anywhere. Just that's what I would suggest. So they kind of hit this slump with some of the animation where I wasn't really into it anymore. This one had a pretty good style, and it was also cool that for each of the shorts, they tried a little bit of a different animation style. They tried to dig into it. In the extra features, they talk about, we did this Kirby style and things for this short. It's impossible to do it for a feature, which I call bullshit on. You just don't want to do it for a feature. You could absolutely up your art game for a feature. You could absolutely up the animation level for a feature. It's just you're choosing not to. The company is choosing not to, which that's fine, but don't make it sound like it's an impossible feat to achieve that level of animation for a feature, because that's horseshit. So I kind of would recommend it if you're into that stuff. The House of Mystery one I thought was pretty fun. The House of Mystery and the Commandy one were the two where at the end of it, I could easily sit and watch another 6 episodes. I felt like they built a really good world. They left it at a cliffhanger on purpose. They left it as kind of like, this is a chunk of a bigger story. They tried to do that with all 4 of them. I just felt it didn't work as strongly in the other ones. The Blue Beetle one was fun, I guess, but it was kind of, I don't know, it kind of had one note to it, which is we're going to basically mimic the old Spider-Man cartoon. In the special features, they talked that they were trying to mimic Ditko's style in that one. I didn't see that. I saw them mimicking the 60s Spider-Man cartoon is what I got out of it. I didn't I guess if I looked at it again, knowing that, sure, I guess there's some Ditko-isms in there, I suppose, but they didn't lean into it like they did with the Kirby stuff. For the Commandy, it was clearly Kirby. Even the backgrounds, they spent a lot of time apparently working on the backgrounds to give them that Kirby flavor, and I think it worked to a really good effect. The Losers was the one I was kind of most excited about, and it disappointed me kind of the most. They mixed sort of the Losers and World War II war books where they were fighting dinosaurs. So they kind of mulched them together, put the Losers into this scenario where they're fighting dinosaurs. I would have much preferred to see, again, if you're going to mimic some styles, like there was Kirby stuff in the Losers as well too, but I would have loved to have seen them try to mimic a bit of a Kubert style and give us kind of a classic Losers story, like actually appeared, instead of trying to mash a couple of different genres. But hey, you know what you get into when you deal with the mainstream companies. They're not going to do what you want them to do. They're going to do what they think is going to sell, which I totally understand. I get it. Anyway, enough about cartoons. And the final thing that I read from Vertigo this week, and this was my favorite read of the week by a long shot, was this Gifts of the Night by John Bolton and Paul Chadwick. In the kind of vein of Jim Henson's Storyteller, in the vein of Norse mythology, in the vein of kind of the offshoots from the Sandman universe, this really fits well into those worlds there. I loved this first issue. This was the main reason I went down to cover. I knew that in his bins, he must have the rest of these. And of course he did. The only shop in town, I knew that would be the shop in town that I'd have to go to pick up the rest of these. This was so much better. It was one of those books that built and built the further you got into it. The premise is fantastic. The delivery in that first issue is really, really well done, but it really does just kind of ratchet up as it goes through the book. And our main characters, you see their lives just kind of becoming a bit messy. And the art by Bolton, art, color, everything, he did everything, is just a stunner. It's really, really beautiful work here. But honestly, Chadwick tells a hell of an engaging story, and it's one where I won't even show you anything from the final two issues. It's not like you didn't see the twists coming necessarily. It's just that I'm always surprised with some of these books. You have a certain level of expectation when it comes to something with the masthead DC, even if that masthead also says Vertigo. I feel like there's still a bit of a cynic in me where it's like, they're not going to do X, Y, and Z. So then when they do, it becomes even more enjoyable that they kind of took it to that level, right? So fantastic little story, a really quickly told. 4 issues was the perfect length for it. Any more, and I think you would have drawn it out just too much. But this definitely isn't a one-shot story, so I think they handled it incredibly well for these 4 issues. I haven't looked, but I'm curious if Chadwick and Bolton did anything else. This is 1999. If they did anything else for Vertigo, because that will absolutely be something on my list to pick up. But amazing stuff. Really, really great. Highly, highly recommended if you find this out there in your comic hunts. In the dollar bins and things. Let's see, what else do we got here? We got Clobbering Time. I won't say too much about this one. I finally, one of my favorite books by Bolton is Someplace Strange with Ann Nocenti. Oh, excellent recommendation. I don't know that title. I will 100% look for that. Someplace Strange. I won't talk too much about this one. I looked through issue 1 and 2 when I saw them on the rack. The only reason I picked this up is because of Doctor Strange. The art was beautiful, but that was the tipping point for me. If it's going to have a one-off where it's going to be the Thing and Doctor Strange. I'll give it a shot. The art's amazing. I couldn't make heads or tails of the story, and honestly, that doesn't bother me because I don't really care about the story in this part of me. I don't really care too much about the story or wanting to know what's going on, because I don't think for some of this stuff it's always necessary. Again, maybe that's just me, but I feel like when I go into this Marvel world and stuff, I know what I'm getting. I know what I'm signing up for, and it sure as fuck isn't an earth-shattering story. As AFPC put it in the chat on Friday, hey guys, remember, comics are for kids. So with that in mind, this is what you're getting here. Beautiful art by Steve Scroach. That said though, I'll probably go back and pick up the other 2 issues because the art is absolutely the draw for me here. So it was a fun book though. Fun enough. It did as advertised, which is give you some Doctor Strange. Winding down here. Marvel graphic novel from 88 or 89. Okay, so that's the Someplace Strange. Oh, absolutely. He's got some Marvel graphic novels at cover to cover, so I wonder if he's got that one. Citizen Nocturne. This is from M. Dalton Allred. This first appeared in Graphique Musique issues 1, 2, and 3 from, was this Slave Labor, I think? Doesn't say on the front there. I'm pretty sure it was. But this is where it came from, and collected in this trade paperback. It's a vampire story. This is from Brave New Words, this trade paperback. And it was it from 1990? All stories and artwork 90 and 92. So this version came out in 92, and then the actual issues came out in 1990. Beautiful to see his art at this early stage. This is pretty early for Allred. And Laura Allred does lettering on this one because it is all black and white. So also great to see that, just how long they've been working together as well too. It was good. There was some Allred moments for sure where you could see his style. I feel like there's things that he wouldn't do these days, like almost cutting and pasting a face, for example, for 3 panels. I feel like that's something that Allred wouldn't do. And there's some things where you can see it's just not quite there. It still has a really nice character to it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's wonderful watching an artist at these early stages still figuring out their style and kind of giving it, because this is still really accomplished stuff. There's nothing wrong with it, other than we know where Allred ends up. So you can see that the potential there with him. But like I said, other than that, it's a vampire story. The meat of any of these kind of things is that character interactions and how they exist in this world together and apart. And I think he handles all of that really well. His storytelling chops are spot on. There's nothing wrong with following the story. There's nothing wrong with getting from point A to B. It all kind of made sense in this comic vampire world. But yeah, it was a fun read, but mainly for the just simple fact of seeing an artist early in his career figuring shit out. One of the books he had before this, I mentioned this afternoon, it was called Dead Air, which is the name of my radio show that I've had since the early 2000s. I didn't know that. I didn't take that name from Allred. I had no idea that was a thing. So that was kind of interesting to hear, and I'd love to see some of that Dead Air stuff, because like I said, that's even before this, and from the stills that I've seen online, it looks even further away from Allred than this does. So I'm really intrigued to get my hands on that, and I'd love to find the issues as well too. The other issues. We'll open this up actually, because I feel like there was some extra stuff in here. but I might be wrong because this is part 2 of that story. Yeah, slave labor shows on the back there. Yes, so there is another piece in here. So this one I'll put this one up and I'll read it this week. So Lifehouse. So it looks like there's a couple of stories in here. Yeah, 1990. So there's some pages from the first story here before we get into, again, our vampire tale here, which we were just looking at. So amazing stuff. I'm so glad I have that. It's one of the there's so many things enjoyable about digging in those back issue bins and spending some time there. But one of the things I do absolutely love is finding artists that I'm familiar with and writers I'm familiar with. Some stuff that's kind of off radar, because it's so early in their career that people don't necessarily give two shits about it. And finally, tonight, a couple of library books. Michael DeForge. Some of that looks like Patrick Nagel art. I'm not familiar with the name there, AFPC. So a couple of books from Michael DeForge that I had on hold at the library for quite a while. I'd forgotten about them, actually. I was on a list. I was on a queue for these books. So it took a little while for them to get freed up, but finally got them. Read this one pretty much right away. This is Ant Colony. I've read DeForge stuff in the past. I've got some issues of Lose. Me and AFPC were talking about it in the chat this afternoon. That it's not stuff like I enjoyed it. Nothing wrong with it. None of it sticks with me. It didn't really have it didn't really do much for me as far as like the story. There's nothing that stuck out that I'm remembering. Now, DeForge was one of those guys who worked with Adventure Time, I believe. So he was kind of part of that crew. There was all these kind of unusual artists that were working. Ballard, what's his name? Derek Ballard, is that his name? Jesse Jacobs, I think, was working with Adventure Time as well, too. A bunch of kind of really creative, unusual artists. DeForge is Canadian. He did some stuff with Koyama Press. I think this one is drawn in, this one is drawn in Quarterly. This is a fantastic book. I love this one. I sort of paired it with Anders Nielsen's Big Questions because it's kind of talking politics, talking about the world, talking about human interaction through animals. And I think there's something about that first of all lends itself to really interesting stories, but also, I don't know, there's the absurd element as well that I do love. It kind of puts a different perspective on all of these kind of issues. Now, DeForge is fairly political on Twitter. I'm not up to date or up to speed on all of his politics. But what I have seen of his politics, there hasn't been much that I've disagreed with what I've seen. And some of that does come into here. I think it's impossible to separate yourself as a human being, whatever your politics are, from any sort of work of art, whether that's music or comics or painting. Some of that is going to seep into your work, whether you want it to or not. DeForge, I think, is one of those creators who lets it and kind of strives for some of that to come into his writing and some of his storytelling. He doesn't shy away from it. He welcomes it. So this is just filled with so many fantastic moments. But one of the things that kind of struck me from this book, but even more so from The Birds of Maine, which I haven't, I've only just started, was his just abstract cartooning style. If you just saw this strip, this was something I think that I can't remember if it was Rick Ray or I think it might have been Rick Ray talking about it in the chat this afternoon, that this was released on Instagram I can't remember if it was daily or if it was weekly. So just taking this one strip, the kind of abstract cartooning that's going on there is gorgeous. First of all, in the context of the story, you have an idea of what is going on. It makes sense, but taken on its own, it just has this really beautiful abstract painting kind of look to it, painterly look to it. So I love it. I feel like some of these creators, you just have to be in a certain space, whether that's in your life or just in your day when you're reading them. And I feel like DeForge, I think I'm finally ready to devour more DeForge. So I'm going to be looking at the library to see what else they have and maybe try to read a chunk of it. I'll probably reread those Lose issues as well too that I have to give them a second chance, because I haven't read them since I got them. But I'm looking forward to digging into this one. I'm going to take his advice too about just going slowly on this book. I just took it out the other day, so I've got a couple of weeks with it, and I'm sure I can renew it if there's not too many people waiting for it. So I plan to kind of take my time with this one and try not to read it all in one sitting. But that's Michael DeForge. Tom Herpich, yeah, he was in Adventure Time as well too. Hey, yeah, there was a lot of amazing artists associated with that show, which makes sense because it was just such a unique show. I've still never finished the whole series. My son says that it ends really well though, so I think that's it. I believe so. It was a good chunk of reading. It was a good reading week. And like I said, Tuesday night is what I'm going to shoot for with Colin, and we'll do a live stream. I'll post it in advance. So if you want to join us in the chat, that would be fantastic. We'll kind of get to the bottom of what the hell was he thinking doing this canon. And please, God, let there be more. So I hope he kind of continues on with it. I hope he's had success. Tell your friends, if you're on social media, follow Colin and repost that stuff. I don't think he printed thousands of these, so let's help him sell out to give him even more incentive of doing another issue. So thanks very much, AFPC. Always good to see you. Thanks for hanging out, even though you were there this afternoon and pretty much heard everything I said. Gary, Usher, always good to see you. That's it. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you probably next week. All right, later.